Hello, Tea Time. The first guest I'll be interviewing is Dr. Kimmika Williams-Witherspoon. She is much more than a professor at Temple University. She's also an African-American theater scholar, anthropologist, playwright, director, performance poet, and so much more. She has been awarded and nominated for so many things. I will go on for another 2 minutes listing them all. But to name two, she's a winner of the BWIR Chrysler
National Poetry Competition.
Yes, and also the recipient of the 2013 Associate Provost for the Arts Grant.
Yes.
And yeah, welcome our amazing guest. So you started off as a journalism major at Howard.
Yes.
Right? Were you thinking theater at the time? If you were, what made you inspired to make the transition? They're similar, but they're not.
No, they're not the same at all. Honestly, I majored in journalism because I didn't know what else to do. I knew I wanted to write. And I thought that journalism would allow me the opportunity to do what I loved, because I've always written short stories, poems, I wrote novels in my composition books. I mean, was my love. It allowed me to hone my skills as a writer, because journalists have to do the who, what, when, where, how, why.
Right.
Which translates into every other field that I've ever kind of been interested in. So that background of how to do the research and to gather the exposition or background information about a character or an area or a subject matter, all of the skills that I learned as a journalist have, helped me do everything else I've done. Theater was just by accident.
All right. So was it like you went to a play, or you were introduced to it?
I met a man my senior year at Howard when I was on the debate team. We did a tournament in Houston, Texas, at the Barbara Jordan Forensics and Debate Tournament. I've always had a thing for cowboys because I guess my father did. And he was handsome, and he had on a cowboy hat. Madly in love instantly. And 2 months later, after seeing him 3 times, we eloped a week after I graduated. And I ended up living in Houston. Couldn't find a job. Brand new graduate with all my clips from writing for the Hilltop, which was Howard University's newspaper.
Right.
Went to the Houston Post and the Houston Chronicle with my clips, trying to get this job. And I remember one editor kind of peered through the clips and looked up at me over his glasses and said, "Howard University, that's a Negro school." Now this was 1980. So when he said Negro, I knew I wasn't going to get that job. And I also knew that we were in a world in a different place, head-wise, right? But that day, going home, I picked up a community newspaper, and it was a little ad advertising for a director of a new musical by Thomas Melancon. And I said, I could do that. I'd never directed a play. Had seen plays, but that was it. The debate and forensics team taught me the skills of doing monologues and duets and improvisational speaking. So I figured, I could do it. I got the job. It was a 17-member cast. We sold out the entire run. One of the leading actresses got sick just before opening night, and so I stepped into her role and made my acting and directing debut in that play. And then I was bitten by the bug. I just loved it ever since.
The debate between PWI, attending a PWI versus HBCU, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
I am very happy that I made the decision that I did. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I never applied to any other school. I applied to Howard because that was it or nothing.
Okay.
I went to Girls High before the girls were allowed to attend Central. And Girls High was a very it helped make me who I am today, and I'm honored to be one of their distinguished daughters as an alumni. But Girls High was very white-centric, Western-centric, and I knew I wanted to be surrounded by people who looked like me for the college experience, because that meant a great deal to me. I'm glad that I did, and most of the individuals, a great many of the individuals my age and perhaps maybe one generation removed started off at HBCUs, but then they did graduate training at BWIR. And I think that's the way I would recommend for individuals to think about. You learn so much more because those institutions have to be so much more rigorous because everybody thinks they aren't. And so the curriculum will really supersedes what you would find in an Ivy. Even Howard gave me the world. It was called the Mecca of Black education then. I still think it is.
I literally so badly wanted to go to Howard. So badly. I have friends that are there and they're just, it's beautiful.
It is. There's nothing like it.
All right, let's get into personal life and relationships. How did you, with all your accolades and your projects, how did you balance your personal life and your work life?
And it took a toll. When I came home from Howard and from Texas, having made the transition into theater as a playwright and as an actress, I also came back married and with children, because that cowboy, as I mentioned, we ended up getting married in Texas. So I had two small children by the time I was 24. And, but I made a commitment to myself, to my God, and to my children that they were always going to be first. So I chose to work from home. This is long before it became a thing for Black people, right? But I was a writer, I was a journalist. I got a job as a freelancer at the Tribune here in Philly. And so I could pick and choose my assignments. Sometimes they give me an assignment, like with the move bombing. You know, I was given an assignment because of my hairstyle. They figured I could get closer than most of the other journalists. But I could work from home, take the kids with me if I had to do an interview. If I couldn't, my parents were here, and so I had backup. At that time, the Tribune paid freelancers 6 cents a word. Yes, I know, I see your face. So you're calculating in your head how many words you have to write to pay an electric bill. That's what I'm talking about. So I had to be very strategic and do a lot of stories. Eventually, they gave me my own column.
Okay.
Which worked until, as I mentioned, the move bombing happened, and then the move trial, and I made a disparaging metaphor of the move trial in Birdie, Africa, testifying, and it was the night or Halloween Eve or Halloween night, and then I lost my job. But it was okay. It was okay because I made a name for myself as a journalist, and then I was always performing as a performance poet. Plays, I was always writing, and most of my work at that time went up at Bushfire Theater. I taught in the Pennsylvania prisons for the Pennsylvania Prison Society.
That's so cool.
It was. That was one of the best jobs I've ever had. Paid like crap.
It's okay. It's usually like that.
It was the best job I've ever had, and I'd like to think, I taught creative writing in the Women's Detention Center. I'd like to think that I helped some of those young women think about alternate ways of dealing with whatever was going on in their worlds. I found all of these ways to kind of work. But unfortunately, it was also very difficult to maintain a marriage that way. Particularly as a performance poet. Because you're performing for the most part by yourself, and individuals will come up and they want to get your signature, your autograph, and tell you how wonderful this was, or this poem saved my life, or whatever. And for a lot of individuals, particularly in my first husband's case, a young African-American male who, from the South, who thought that men should receive that kind of accolade was difficult. So, long story short, her first marriage didn't last long. Being there for my girls, that was important to me. And so you took all these jobs. I was working all the time, oftentimes in hoopties. But we made it work. And, I took them everywhere I went. My son, he too. I can't tell you how many times he fell asleep on the floor in WRTI because I had to take the students on the radio. And he literally has grown up here at Temple, going to all the venues. He's been to, I think the last time we counted, it was 18 different countries. It's meant that we don't have a lot of, or didn't have a lot of the economic wealth that some of my peers might have had, but I gave them intellectual wealth.
That is so much more richer.
I think so. I tell the young women who fall in love here in my classes to know that it is hard, that you have to work at this thing called love, regardless of who your mate is. And it doesn't matter what gender. You have to work at it every single day. And then when someone stops working, that's when it usually ends.
That spoke to me. So, what was the best connection you made throughout this journey? Whether it's a student, because you're also a professor while still doing what you do, love, or a project. You have to have a connection with the project.
In terms of connections, I think all of my students, they'll tell you they hated my 10-page term papers, but most of those students are still my friends today. They come in town, they call me up, they come to the house, I cook for them, I had parties in my house for them. I wanted them to know that someone cared for them and their success.
What's your favorite hardship thus far?
The end of the second marriage was, my son was 3 months old, and the second husband left the day before I was supposed to go to Texas, to Houston actually, to a conference and deliver a paper. And I think he was so angry. He wanted me to not be able to do it, to fail. And because I was breastfeeding, I took my son with me. It was 3 months. I hired Nannies R Us, I think they were called, or Nannies USA. 5-star hotels usually have access to these services, and they're super expensive. But I could pick and choose who I wanted. They were bonded, and I wanted an older black woman who looked like a grandmother and all that. Came into the hotel. I just wanted her to watch my son from this time to this time while I was on the stage presenting. And then for the rest of the conference, he was with me. It was never any problem because, again, I'm breastfeeding. And it taught me that I didn't have to stop the dream, but I could still do everything. And that's why he's been to 18 countries and seen the world. I've taken them everywhere I've gone. So it was hard. You're crying because of the demise of a relationship and a dream, but at the same time, the intestinal strength to know that I can do this, and I have to, because I've told that little child that they can do anything.
You're making me excited to be a mother.
It's one of the jobs that you never prepared enough for, but it's the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. And then the second job is teaching. Yeah. And I found that out the hard way. Who knew? I wanted to write.
Right.
but those were the best jobs I've been lucky enough, blessed enough to have.
What change do you want to see in the poetry and theater world? And what change do you want to see in the world in general?
In the theater world, I want them to get to a place where they tell more inclusive stories of the individuals who have helped to make the American fabric. And what does that mean? As you mentioned off camera, I'm tired of trauma stories. That, years ago I wrote a play where they had to where a couple made love on stage. Well, not really, but because I was so tired of seeing black men hitting black women or cussing them out and calling them names. We love, and let's capture that. Love, it's so much of who we are as a people. And so even in the poetry about the enslavement process, there are lines in there about, in a poem that I'm most known for, it's called So Now You Call Me a Bitch. But
I love that. I watched that. I loved it.
Thank you. But, the line, I loved you at night with my body to make you forget the indiscretions and the wrongs. And so now you can call me a bitch. Well, the fact is, we did still love. Despite being forced to bed people and make babies so that capitalism could continue to profit off of the backs of black and brown bodies. We still loved individuals. We still utilized that expression. And the fact that we can't show that in American popular culture is problematic, and it always has been. And so my work does. Granted, you run up against the reality that white folks don't want to see that. And so even though I've won the Pew in 2000, which is one of the highest accolades I guess you could get as a playwright, except for a Pulitzer. Except nobody will do my work. I feel sort of like Charles Fuller, one of the reasons who recently passed away, God bless the dead. Charles Fuller, when I would talk with him as a mentor, wrote a soldier's play, and then it became a movie called A Soldier's Story. The Philadelphia Theater Company would not produce his work. Why? Because he wrote about black people. Well, that's problematic. So the change I want to see in the world in terms of theater is to tell inclusive stories and not just trauma, because there's more to our story than trauma. And not just ours, but Native American and Asian American, and the list goes on and on and on. In poetry, I think I've already changed the poetry scene. Yeah. I have made enough young performance poets that have gone off into the United States who are teaching and doing the work and performing, that I've already made that change, I think. In terms of the world at large, I'm getting cynical in my old age, but I hope that we can return to some of those foundation skills that our grandparents and our great-grandparents had. Learning to love your neighbors.
My mom was just talking about that.
Befriending people, helping. Those, I hope we continue to help when somebody's in need. That's what I pray for the world.
I think it'll happen with time. I think some people are waking up to how dangerous these phones can be and technology can be. Others are just stuck. We'll see.
We'll see.
But that's what art is for, I think.
That's why I'm here. Mm-hmm. That's why I continue to do what I do, even though there's a lot of pushback from other people. But somebody's got to